And I hope it's yours too. So thank you for joining me live here today. I am, if you don't know me, if it's your first time, and sorry about my voice today. I just got back from traveling and I'm still adjusting to Denver air. If you don't know me, I am Dr. Elisa, PhD in Psych, and many other degrees. I have more academic degrees than probably two people need, but I love learning, and that's part of this show. The theme for this show is inspiring a renaissance of spirit. And I've decided over this next several weeks that we're going to talk about how our soul is on a journey. And I have had guests, my past couple guests talked about that in different ways, and my guests today and in 2 weeks, and I think in 2 weeks after that, we're having a similar conversation. I want to remind you, if you don't know, that this show is what I call spiritually multilingual. So if I say Hashem or God and you think the force, go with it. If I say prayer and you like the word meditation, great. Let's not get hung up on the word. Let's dive deeper into the concepts, into the notion that our soul is here on a journey, that our soul craves something in this life. And that is a great deal of what we're guided to do. I also want to, if you're new to the show, I want to tell you that I have a goal, that each of us will be a philanthropist by year's end. And don't worry, that doesn't mean hundreds of thousands of dollars. That means perhaps $1 a week that you donate somewhere. This year, my favorite charity, many years, is the MS Society. And as you know, I did a show about MS and about donating to the MS hike that I fundraise for. It's a great organization, and if you have somebody, know somebody in your life who has MS, connect them to the MS Society. It's very, very helpful. In terms of me, you can find me if you want to chat with me on the Dr. Elisa Show on Facebook, or just on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, and I have a website, elisarobin.com. I am easy to find. I'm also monitoring the Facebook page, the Dr. Elisa Show on Facebook, so that if you're listening, you can also put comments in, and I will try to monitor. I have to tell you, the hardest thing about this show, honestly, is looking at myself and noticing I am she of wild hair on a regular basis. So just put up with that. Okay, I don't want to waste any time talking about me. So as you know, I have a book. You can find it on Amazon, The Way of the Well. It's a spiritual adventure with a bunch of romance in it. And you can find this actually anywhere, any online place you buy books, but Amazon. And you can get it on Kindle, or you can get it in paperback. And that's enough about me. So as you know, the people that I have on the show are people who have inspired me in some way. And my guest is absolutely one of those people. I want to tell you a story. I've had a few careers in my life, as many of you have, and often the time in between careers, in that transition zone, is really stressful and sometimes overwhelming. I was in one of those times. I had earned my PhD. I couldn't find a job. I was struggling to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life, struggling to pay any of my bills. I'd gone through all of my savings. My marriage was kind of in a rocky place. Spiritually, I felt lost. And I tried everything, right? I went to sweat lodges and studied with a shaman and tried New Age Wiccan metaphysics and read Buddhism, and none of those resonated with me. I learned things, but they didn't really resonate. And then, completely out of character, I never do this, I went to a Jewish women's retreat. And yes, I'm Jewish, I was born Jewish, but I'd never done anything like this. In fact, any women's retreat, it's just not what I do. And I met this amazing woman there named Ellyn Hutt, and she gave a workshop. And I don't even remember what the workshop was on. What I do remember is I started to cry. And I went up after the workshop and was crying and talking to her and saying, can I talk to you? And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I do remember somewhere in the conversation she said to me, maybe you should try Judaism again. And why don't you just start the Shabbat? Just light Shabbat candles. And I'm not even sure how many years ago that was, 30, I don't know. And that started my Shabbat candle lighting ritual. I will tell you that I was in New York last week, and on Shabbat I was out with some new friends, and we were at a restaurant, and they were all Jewish, and I said, this is good because I have my little traveling Shabbat candles, and we have bread on the table, and we have wine, and we're doing Shabbat in the middle of a Georgian restaurant outside on their back patio in New York. Somebody said to me at the table, should we ask permission? And I said, no, we're just lighting candles. It's fine. And I when I've done this in other places, people have joined in. It's been very amazing. So that's my introduction. Ellyn, thank you for being on my show. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited to be with you, and I love just getting to hear the story again of how we met.
So
it was
what
really
I would love
memorable.
I'm glad. And what I'd love you to do is talk about your side of that journey. You are an author. Before we go any further, your book, which we're going to talk about today, Living in the Present Moment, A Divine Design. And if you're listening, you can find this on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and type in Ellyn Hutt, and the book will come up. You are a well-known educator. Just talk to me about your journey.
My journey has been so organic. I know people use that term a lot, but really organic. The same retreat that I met you at, I went on for over 20 years, but when I first went, it was after several years of a friend of mine trying to convince me to come. It wasn't something I was so likely to do. I didn't have such a great history, in middle school. Girls were kind of mean, and so the idea of going to a women's retreat with a lot of girls sounded really awful. But she talked me into going, asking me to fulfill a role. I had been involved in our synagogue with leading services. I belonged to a conservative synagogue at that time. And she said, we want you to come and lead the services on Shabbat, on Shabbos, on the Sabbath. And so I said, okay, I'll go. And that was the beginning. And then I went every single year for the duration for how long the retreat went on. And it was such a gift to me because I met so many different women. It was on neutral territory. It was up at a ranch camp or in the mountains, not at any one particular synagogue. So women from around the community felt free to come and explore, and I explored too. So I would say that was my greenhouse, where I got to try things, grow, learn, and mostly to share. And when we say that the person who learns the most when they teach is the teacher, not the student, I just learned so much, and my journey went from that and expanded. And teaching classes, teaching women outside of the retreat environment, for different synagogues, my own Jewish practice then started growing, and that was really the big start of it.
Wow. So, and that led to classes you teach weekly, right, online. Online
right.
Now, right, because of 2020, and a book. So was the book also an organic growth process from teaching?
Yes. It came out of an initial, someone in the community, Dr. David Sanders, had asked me if I would work on a project with him, exploring the Hebrew letters and their spiritual meaning. And we were working with a group, Sari Horowitz and Risa Aqua. And the four of us were meeting together. It was in the days before really computer. We were recording our sessions on cassette tapes. It was really primitive. And we were working on it, and it was a wonderful group of people, and we learned a lot, but we also found that 4 people trying to write a book together wasn't really successful. And so we disbanded with total harmony, but I ended up with the sheets of paper that had all of our notes and all of the cassette tapes, and I couldn't let it go, but I didn't know what to do with it. I do not see myself, writing was never my passion, speaking is my passion, and so it both terrified me and compelled me at the same time. And so I tried to create something on my own for a couple of years, and then I asked a friend of mine who became my co-author, and that is Tina Slatkin. And we basically redirected the book, redirected the whole premise, and worked together for 18 years to craft this book. So this was so people think, well, this must be as long as War and Peace, but it is actually, as Dr. Elisa showed you, it's a very skinny book that is a distilled essence of the wisdom that we wanted to share, but mostly that we gained along the way. Tina and I both said that we could have written a book about writing the book, that each of the chapters that we wrote, we needed and used for ourselves in our own life's journey, all the things that happened to us. I mean, in that time period, I started the project when I was 39, and we published it 2 years ago, and I just turned 65.
Wow.
So this has been, we've seen a lot. We've had marriages, deaths, illnesses, both become grandmothers. We have seen a lot of life throughout the time, and this book and the chapters in it have been a steady companion to us. We use the book as like the show or the book Jumanji. I think it was about the kids who are playing a game, and the game comes to life as they are playing it. So each of the chapters really blossomed for us, and we used it, and I still read the book as if I didn't write it, to review and refresh and reconnect.
That's an amazing story. I love how you said terrified and compelled, because I think that's almost a spiritual message that I might find in the book, that it's frightening. Parts of this are of a soul's journey or a spiritual journey are frightening, and yet we feel compelled to do that, right?
Yes, and I what compelled me was the idea about living in the present moment from a Jewish perspective, because I'd read books that were Buddhist, some written by Jewish women, and thinking, where's our book? Where's the book from the Jewish perspective? We're sitting on top of a tradition that is so rich with a treasure trove of insight and wisdom and guidance to help us practice living the present moment, but there's no book for us. And so people are going other places. So I was, on the one hand, always checking bookstores and online to see if somebody else had written it, and half wishing that they did so that I didn't need to, and then half hoping that they didn't so that I could. So I really felt that Hashem had called me to do it, and I just couldn't quite answer the door, and but then decided I would regret it. I went to a session it was about some other thing, and it said, if you died, like whatever, tomorrow, what would be your one regret? And many regrets about relationships and things like that, but what would you regret having not done? And it wasn't not seeing the world, it was I didn't write the book. And once I had that realization, I got to a place where I had to push past my fear about it and do it, and to have a partner in Tina, and we had such a beautiful time together working on it. But it was having that image of I would regret this if I didn't do it.
Thank you for being so transparent about that. It seems that often we look at we see the end product. They wrote a book, I have a radio show, whatever, and we forget that the journey is part of the story, and in fact it is the bigger part of the story, right, that leads, and so thank you for the transparency there. I want to follow up on something else you said. We've both alluded to it, and that is that Buddhism, which is Buddhism's lovely, this is no criticism at all, seems to be universally accepted as a path that people can explore from any religious tradition and find meaning. And we know, statistically I know this, that the largest number of converts to Buddhism in America are Jews, and many Jewish women. So many of those Buddhist books have been written by Jewish women, or Jewish men. And yet, as soon as we talk about Jewish wisdom, there seems to be, I don't know, an astringent product or a push-pull. Like, I don't know, that seems like not appropriate for universal consumption. But in your book, it clearly is. Did you have some of that experience with people, or have you had that, where people say, well, why Judaism? Why not Buddhism? Or this is too specific as opposed to great metaphor, analogy, and wisdom. Have you experienced that?
So what I've experienced is on both sides. One is, if you notice on the cover, there is nothing that says Jewish about it.
Right.
We put a very tiny little green Jewish star as the dot on the word design. And other than that, you would not know it was a Jewish book, because we wanted people to pick it up. And sometimes not even people who aren't Jewish, sometimes specifically Jewish people have an aversion or a resistance to Jewish wisdom because I don't know what they think they're going to find. So we were mostly trying to break that barrier, that it would be accessible to all Jewish people without coming along with religious instruction and whatever people were conjuring up in their heads about that. As far as other people, it is because it is written with a point of accessibility for someone at any level. We chose topics that would be familiar to somebody who is just out in the world. Most people, whether they're Jewish or not, have heard of Hanukkah, they've heard of Shabbat, they've heard of Passover, they've heard of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So we talked about holidays and different traditions that would be familiar to many different kinds of people. And we have had people who have bought the book and have used it, who were following who are Christian, following a Christian tradition, and have found it very useful and accessible because the inner messages are the same for everyone. What makes it unique Jewishly is that we're using, I'll call them Jewish props. So we have a Seder plate and a Hanukkah menorah and a mezuzah and a piece of matzah and a charity box. So that makes it Jewish flavored and accessible to people. They can access it easily, but it doesn't limit it as far as the internal message. So I can give an example. The Hanukkah menorah, the holiday of Hanukkah, is about miracles. And it's about the miracles of the oil lasting. It was supposed to last for 1 day, but instead it lasted for 8 days. And it's also about the military victory. But basically the message is about starting with what you have and not being thrown by perceived limitations. That to not get stuck in perceived limitations, even in the physical world. But it could also be, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough energy, I don't have enough resources, I don't have enough know-how. But to say, then start with what you have. So Hanukkah is not just a holiday in December, it is a place to be in an emotional state to access at any time, and you don't have to have a menorah to do it. You can just say, I'm in my Hanukkah room. I am in a place where I need to think about starting with what I have.
So, thank you so much. I mean, you and I could go on for hours.
As we usually do at our wonderful lunches together.
We usually do. Is that why you use the metaphor of a house? Because it's about place, which is a unique thing, right? That it's not just about time and perception; it's about place. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So the metaphor of the house, and I just want to add in that although Tina and I took 18 years to write this book, we never changed our framework the whole time. So what was good at the beginning stayed the entire time, which I personally think is somebody who, changes outfits or something several times a day. The idea that we had a concept that worked, that we never wavered on that. was very reassuring to me. So we use the idea of a house because our premise was the dictum that you are where your thoughts are. That's where you really live. You live where whatever you're thinking about is where you actually live, and that becomes the place in which and through which and with which you experience your life, which means you can choose that. So while we have a whole section about time and the unique aspect of time and accessing and riding the wave of certain spiritual times of the year, and that's very important, it's not limited to that. So we made it more like a space, just as if in your own home you would go into the living room to read and to relax, you go into the kitchen to cook, you go into your luxurious bath to, unwind, you go to your bedroom, that we go into different places to experience certain states of being. So why not then have a house that is the house of the present moment, that I can go into my Hanukkah alcove, I can go into my Pesach room, I can go into my Shabbat room anytime I want to. It doesn't have to be like, oh, it's only Thursday, I have to wait till Friday to get to Shabbat. It's like, no, I can be in Shabbat, I can be in Pesach, I can be in Hanukkah, whenever I feel the need to be. So that's why we use the metaphor of a physical space, so that it didn't seem so esoteric, that it, in fact, when you're talking about, any ideas that came to me, I was thinking, in this world of technology now, I would love to create a virtual house of the present moment for people who are highly visual, where they could enter into these spaces and see this and have a more complete experience and access that. So that's why we used a house. We also used it because, and part of it we did change in the book, we limited it because it got too unwieldy, is we talked about, first of all, what does a present moment mean from a Jewish perspective, and we can talk about that. But we were talking about also, what does it mean to live in the house of the past or the house of the future? What do those houses look like? And we had a whole elaborate thing that the house of the future with misuse of imagination and memory can look like a fun house where everything is distorted, and a house of the past where it's filled with pain and regret, and all of that can look like a place that is haunted and that is locked in and has blackened windows and no door and feel trapped. And so we said some people live in what we call a dysfunctional duplex of the house of the future and the house of the past. And our goal is either scrape off, remodel, rebuild a house of the present moment that is the ideal use of both memory and imagination for a healthy, joyful, expansive life.
That is so powerful, because we often hear people say, don't live in the past, don't live in the future, it's called the present because it's a gift, and yet the imagery you just talked about encapsulates and enlivens that verbiage. Is if you're living in the past, it's haunted. If you're living in the future, it's distorted. That is sort of amazing imagery for me. Let me just have you keep going. You know you have to come back on the show because we're not going to get through everything. I'm just saying that now.
My pleasure.
Talk about memory and imagination, because you definitely discussed that in the book.
We really is a basic premise of the book. A number of different things that we had read talked about living in the present moment from the perspective of let go of the past and don't think about the future. And we say that's not really what it is. If you forget about the past and don't think about the future, forget about the past, that's called amnesia. Like I don't remember my past and not thinking about the future, we say that's called adolescence, like not thinking about the consequences of what you're doing, of the choices you're making. It's like, why would that ever be an ideal state of being? So what we are understanding and explaining and providing ways to think about it differently is, why do people say that about the past? It's because people's memories are of things that are sad, difficult, and painful. And so it seems like, oh, we'll just not use memory. But memory is a gift. And so the answer is really to use the memory to extract wisdom. That is the message and the meaning and the use of memory. God created us with memory. We mourn people who have lost their memory. There's nothing more sad than to see somebody who has lost their memory. Why would we want to enter that state? But what we use the memory for, it's a powerful tool. And imagination, I know I can be like this, is used to often conjure up fear and predictions of, you know, it's going to be terrible, and it's going to be, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, until we figure ourselves out. So it's like, well, don't think about the future. It's like, well, no, the future is about using our imagination to conjure up a vision to inspire us, because we have to have something that we're working toward. That when we have a goal, we don't really want to be living our life based on whim. I mean, for a couple hours a day or a day out of the year, I'm just going to do what I do, but that's not really leading a life. So we want to be able to have a basis. And so we are, instead of dismissing memory and imagination, we are bringing them in and using our memory to extract wisdom and our imagination to create vision. And with wisdom and vision, we bring that to any moment we are currently in, and that is a full present moment. This even goes for people who are interested in this. The name of God, that in Hebrew, that we say Adonai, which means my master, but it's the Hebrew letters Yud, He, Vav, and He. Those 4 letters can be rearranged to spell past, present, and future. So past is He, Yud, He, present is He, Vav, He, and future is Yud, He, Yud, He. So it says God's name in and of itself is I would call it what's the word?
An acronym, perhaps, for, or
yeah,
the metaphor
bring it
for
all together,
yes.
Past, present, and future, because we say God is outside of past, present, future, but for the human experience, it's a convergence. So past, present, and future are supposed to converge in the present moment. We see this in our holidays. For example, the holiday of Pesach, of Passover. We are remembering being slaves, and we are remembering what we are supposed to learn from that. And it is also a celebration of a future redemption and perfection of humanity that's about the future. That's the vision that enlivens us about Elijah the prophet, and that's why we open the door. Elijah's going to come. That's the future. But we are experiencing it in the Seder, in the Passover Seder, in our house at the moment. But it is a convergence of past, present, and future. And that is really present moment living.
I have to say, there's a lovely redefinition of past, present, and future that you just presented. There is a deep philosophical framework that you've created that is very much, it's not just a meme, it's not a bumper sticker. It has a depth to it, and it also highlights something about Jewish wisdom that I find enchanting and invigorating, and that is that we're also often in a paradox. There's one way that memory is harmful and that imagination is harmful, but not always. And yes, we're present, but we're present with the past and the future, and that's a paradox, and the answer is yes. Right?
Yes.
That Judaism is, Jewish wisdom, let me put it that way, is full of, right? The way, the philosophy that sits on paradox. Is that right?
I would say that paradox may be one of the best ways to describe Jewish philosophy, theology, and Jewish life. For example, we have the paradox of the uniqueness of the individual, but the importance of the group. The grandeur of God as the infinite creator of the universe, and the significance of humanity. Like those things, even when we get to body and soul, it's already a paradox. How do we have a physical body that is decaying as we speak, no matter how much Botox anyone ever gets? It's going down. It is going down. There's only one direction. With an infinite soul that is eternal. Those two things don't even make sense, that they can come together in one human being. That we live together as a body-soul combination is already a paradox. And everything else flows from it. And it's being comfortable with the paradox. How do we have an all-knowing God and free choice? How do we have that? We don't understand it. So I'd say that living in the realm of Jewish wisdom and Jewish life is embracing the paradox of all of that, and being A-okay with it.
So, if you've just tuned in, this is the Dr. Elisa Show on KUHS Denver, the stream. I have an amazing guest. If you've missed the first half of the show, you'll be able to listen to it on my website, elisarobin.com. It'll be streaming on Facebook, and so you can, and you're going to want to do that because it's been amazing so far. Ellyn Hutt is known in Denver as an amazing educator. She is an author. We're talking about her book, Living in the Present Moment, A Divine Design. And for those of you who are wondering why you should listen to something that sounds Jewish, I would present to you that you probably listen to many things that sound spiritually Buddhist and spiritually New Age and spiritually, and that that many of those wisdoms come in part from ancient wisdom that we find buried in Torah and in Jewish thought. So stay tuned. So, Ellyn, this is amazing as always, and I'm always worried that we'll run out of things to talk about, and now I'm thinking I need 2 hours. So I want to take a jump a bit, and I want to go further into your book. And once you have us in the house, you talk about the courtyard and you talk about Miriam. And like many Jewish women, I am enchanted and often haunted by the story of Miriam. And so can you just tell us about Miriam and how she shows up in your book?
I'd love to. Miriam is literally the courtyard, the center of the house of the present moment. So it's called Miriam's courtyard. Miriam, just to place her, is the sister of Moses, of Moshe. She was born at a time of enslavement of the Jewish people in Egypt, and she was also a midwife along with her mother. She was a Nevi'ah, she was a prophetess as well, and she is the embodiment for women particularly, but for all of the Jewish people, of living life in the present moment. She's the present moment woman, and I could talk about her for days. So, just to start, her name, Miriam, and I one time met a woman whose Hebrew name was Miriam, and she hated it because it comes from the word mar, meaning bitter. So the word Miriam is Maryam, or Marim, which means bitterness or bitter waters. It's actually related to the word marina, which is the same thing as far as salty. So it's salt water. Salty water is associated, of course, with tears, but there's other salt water as well. Now, in Hebrew and in the Torah, when words are written, there are no vowels. There are only letters. So words can be read in different ways. So the word marim, which means bitterness, also can be read as Merim, which means to lift up. And that she was that person. So she was born into bitterness, and there was an acknowledgement of that. So living in the present moment doesn't mean that you're in denial of what is challenging and difficult and painful. But it tells us what our opportunity is, which is to lift up. And she lifted up the Jewish women specifically in continuing to have children to build the Jewish people, and then serving as a midwife. So while Moses was a leader of one type, she was a builder of the Jewish people. And the prophet Micah says, quoting God, "I gave you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to lead you." So she is equivalent in her leadership. And in the merit of her greatness, the Jewish people were supplied with water for the 40 years of wandering in the desert. Water is also considered to be the element that is about living in the present moment, because water by definition goes with the flow. It goes however, it shapes itself to whatever container it is in, whether it's your basement or whether it's, a pitcher, whatever it is, that's how water works. So she is the water woman, and Mayim, water, is in the word Miriam as well. What's also interesting is the Hebrew word for Egypt is Mitzrayim. It means a Meitzar is a narrow place, but in the word Mitzrayim is the word Mayim. It means that even in this narrow, stuck place that is oppressive, there is an opportunity for flow. And we describe it that that what starts out as a stumbling block can become a stepping stone. And that Miriam is that kind of person. And then, so there are several stories about her in the Torah and in the stories from our sages as well that talk about her with just amazing aspects of living in the present moment. And you tell me how much time we have, because I can share one of them if you'd like,
Share.
if you wanted to go on.
No, please
Tell
share
me.
one. Please share one.
Okay, share one. So, Miriam was a little girl, and when her brother Moses was born, and there was a threat of death, not a threat, there was a decree of death against all newborn Jewish baby boys. And so her parents hid Moses for the first 3 months of his life, and then they put him in a reed basket and put him in the river. Miriam, it said, stayed to see what was going to happen to him. And it's a very short sentence, but it says she stationed herself to know what was going to happen. She didn't make predictions, especially when she saw the Pharaoh's daughter find her brother and reach out and take him. A normal person would have said, oh my gosh, Pharaoh's daughter has him, he's dead, this is a catastrophe, this is horrible. Miriam instead waited to see what was really happening, not what she thought was happening and what she thought was going to happen. And she saw that Pharaoh's daughter embraced the baby, her brother, and so she asks a question. She says to Pharaoh's daughter, do you need a wet nurse for him? Do you need somebody to feed that baby? And in that moment, she takes the whole idea of what is happening now? What's the next step that I could take that would lead toward redemption of the Jewish people? The next step is that baby needs to eat. So sometimes we first of all get caught up in scenarios, and we're so busy making predictions we don't actually see what is happening. And switching from predictions to Miriam, which is to make preparations. What's a preparation for the next step of an unfolding of redemption? Before this person grows up to be the leader of the Jewish people, he has to have breakfast. And so sometimes we underestimate the value of the next small step that needs to happen as our life's journey goes through its process. And we get stuck. So Miriam embodies this. And she stationed herself. She was poised, she wasn't paralyzed, she was waiting to know what was going to happen.
So whenever I speak with you, what comes alive for me are the feminine aspects, the female aspects of Judaism and Torah and stories, and how exactly a woman would think, right? Like, oh, the baby's hungry, let's feed the baby. Next thing to do, feed the baby. And in the middle of this story of, right, on the way to getting Torah, and like all of these, the rest of this story, on some level it starts with make sure you feed the baby. I'm wondering if you can speak to just a bit, because there's so much, there's an assumption that Judaism is the most patriarchal of all religions, and that women are totally disregarded. And whenever I speak with you, that feminine aspect of it comes alive. Can you just speak to that for a minute or two?
Sure, absolutely. So the masculine and the feminine, men and women, are completely equal in Judaism, though we do have the premise that there are different spiritual paths, that we have different spiritual paths that are informed by being a man or a woman, but they are complementary, and there's not an order in them as far as higher or lower.
Okay.
In hierarchy, yes, thank you. In fact, if anything, the woman is considered at the higher level. So in the Talmud, which is our book of Jewish law, it says that it was in the merit of righteous Jewish women that the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. And then in the future, it will be the redemption of the Jewish people, and all of humanity will be in the merit of righteous Jewish women. Wow. So I don't know how much higher on the scale you want to be than being the one responsible for the redemption of the Jewish people. In addition, the Jewish women, going back to Sarah, our first matriarch, was always the idea is that women embody the ability to have spiritual clarity focus and strong dedication and loyalty. So, for example, the story, people might be familiar with the sin of the golden calf, the Jewish people building the golden calf. So the women did not participate in that. They did not, and people make a joke and say they didn't want to give their jewelry, but that's not what we understand. They did not participate in that. They did not lose faith. They did not lose trust. In Egypt, during the oppression, while their children were being killed, they still continued to have babies, and they inspired their husbands to continue to want to build the Jewish people. Had there not been a Jewish people, there would have been nobody to redeem. So the Jewish women are always the ones who keep their eyes on the prize. Being able to have that focus, it says Jewish women were given the gift of the holiday of Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is our celebration of the new month, every Hebrew month. And it's the celebration when the moon is new. Many cultures celebrate when the moon is full. Oh, that's much more exciting and interesting to celebrate. That's something, no one says, did you see the new moon you can't even see? So our celebration is when there's nothing, when you can't see anything. And so this was given to women, especially to celebrate, because women have the ability to maintain faith and trust in times of darkness. Spiritual darkness, physical darkness, whatever it might be, to recognize that when it is completely dark, it means that the moon will be waxing. There's going to be a turn. How long that's going to be, who knows? But it is the patience with that process, and that is embodied in the Jewish woman. So we have, our in Hebron, where the matriarchs and patriarchs are buried. Is Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I'll just throw in there, just because I always love how this works, and this is not in the book, is the Jewish people are called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. The word Yisrael is an acronym for all of the matriarchs and patriarchs. The first letter Yud is for Yaakov, Jacob, and Yitzchak, Isaac. The Sin is for Sarah. The Resh, the R, is for Rachel, Rachel, and Rebecca, Rivka. The Aleph is for Abraham, and the Lamed is for Leah. So there are 7 altogether, which is a complete number. That always means completion, the matriarchs and the patriarchs. The name of our people itself is a combination of the men and the women who are our founders. So it just has no basis. Are there differences in what women and men do? Only on the margin, actually. Most everything, women can't kill, can't commit adultery, can't do any of those other things. We have some unique little, I'd say, tributary paths that are different for men and women. But it's like, we're counting on the women. That's what we say.
Yeah, I remember actually being in a class with you, and you were talking about this, and somebody in the class said something about, how do you know that we're spiritually different? And I said, you know what? We actually see that in other traditions. Back in my sweat lodge days, that traditional sweat lodges, men did warrior sweats and women did women's sweats, and they were radically different than each other, and they weren't mixed, because feminine energy needs to be held in a certain way, different than masculine energy. Not better or worse, it's that difference.
It's just different. It's like yin and yang, or yin and yang, however you pronounce it. It's different. And it goes back to creation. When it talks about in Genesis, which we're soon going to be celebrating the creation of the first humanity for the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, the new year. And it talks about the creation. And the creation of man, of the first being, the word is Vayitzar. And he was fashioned, he was formed, and said, out of the dirt, he was made out of dirt. And then when the creation of woman, it says Vayiven. It means she was built. And it says from an internal strong structure of bone, and then built outward. So it says the woman was built from the inside out, and the man was built from the outside and then in. So there is an internal, external aspect to it, and the word Vayiven is related to the word Bina, which means a deep understanding of that which is within and not superficial. It says, and that has been the special gift of all women, because the first woman was not Jewish. That was the gift of all women have this. The Jewish woman is obligated to cultivate that, a sense of internality, not not hidden and shy and like not there, but how do you cultivate internality? So we know, how do you do that for yourself? You have to have times of privacy, of going and not getting distracted by that which is
Right.
external, that which is appears to be one thing but is really something else. So this is considered the spiritual gift of women, and that she's also responsible for using it. So if you're given a gift, you have to use it.
To use it.
And you're responsible for not using it. You're accountable for not using it.
And we could stay on this topic, but I'm going to move us a little bit because we could stay on this topic. But you mentioned that we were coming up to Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year's, and I'm always struck at the difference between the secular New Year and Rosh Hashanah, right? So the secular New Year, we buy a bunch of alcohol and we go somewhere and we count down the minute and the second, and then boom, we're in another year. And the Jewish New Year, we spend 40 days preparing for this opportunity to transform who we are as we enter a new year. And they're so radically different that when I say to people, Rosh Hashanah is a new year, I know the image they have is completely different than what is going on. So I'm wondering if you could talk about, because one of the aspects of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that strike me so deeply and resonate with me so deeply is Teshuva, to return. Can you talk about that in that framework?
Sure. So we are getting ready to enter what's called the high holiday season, and if you are involved with anybody who is Jewish, who is observant of all these holidays, basically you can just not make any plans with them for the entire month of September. So we have the holidays. What's interesting is the order. We have our new year first, called Rosh Hashanah, which literally means the head of the year. It is followed 10 days later by Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. What's interesting is that we don't have the Day of Atonement for forgiving sins first, and then have Rosh Hashanah, have the new year.
Right.
You would think, like, let's get rid of last year's problems, and then we'll have the new year. We'll have a clean slate. This is very different, and it's a beautiful, paradoxical question. Rosh Hashanah says, no, let's talk about not what you've done wrong, but Rosh Hashanah is about what are your plans for the future? What are you setting your sights on? How do you want to be for the new year? It is only when we have a place, I will call it, of spiritual self-esteem, and a place of feeling optimistic about where we're going for the future, that I even have the spiritual strength to look back and confess the things that I've done wrong. It puts me in a stronger, more secure and hopeful place if I have Rosh Hashanah first. So what's interesting about the 40 days that Dr. Elisa mentioned is the 40 days are from the month prior to Rosh Hashanah to that Yom Kippur. Those are the 40 days. And this Teshuva, instead of being so much about beating ourselves up, Teshuva means to return. And it says return to what? It's like to return to your true spiritual path. This is like a factory reset. You know, on your phone you push like 3 things at one time and it takes you back. It's like this is a factory reset. And then we'll deal with the bugs that got into the system. So first we have the reset. And the Teshuva process is to remind ourselves with Rosh Hashanah first, which is our souls are inherently pure. They are of a divine source. They come straight from God. They are eternal, and at some level they cannot be touched. That's the ultimate Teflon. It cannot be touched. However, we can get it pretty schmutzy. We can get it pretty dirty. But we have to understand that our wrongdoings are not intrinsic to who we are, except in very, very rare cases. And we're not talking about like your mother-in-law or your sister or your next-door neighbor. Not those cases. They're more like a soiled garment. And the process of Teshuva is to take off the soiled garment of our mistakes to return to our true selves. What often gets in people's way is they don't necessarily know that there's a true self under there. They're not sure that there is an untouched spot. Interestingly, the astrological sign for the month preceding Rosh Hashanah, the month of Elul, is Virgo, is the Virgin. And the definition of virgin means untouched. So we spend these 40 days recognizing that there is a place inside of us, our soul, that is untouched and untouchable, and that therefore we want to just clean up the things that don't fit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like barnacles on a ship. They can be encrusted, but they're not really part of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And the stain on your dress isn't really part of your dress.
Mm-hmm.
It can be removed. So even having the mindset that it's possible is a prerequisite. So Rosh Hashanah starts us off on the right foot and telling us about planning for the coming year. What do we want it to be like? And then we can go through the process of letting go of what has attached to us like barnacles to the ship. It doesn't fit, it's not really me. But it would be the same thing as we think our mistakes are us, which is why we get offended if somebody points out our mistakes. But if you had a dress and you sat down in gum, and somebody said to you, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I have to tell you, you have gum on the back of your dress," you'd be like, "Oh, thank you so much for telling me." If someone says, "Oh, I have to tell you, you said something that was really hurtful," you're like, "Who are you to tell me that?" So we get offended because we over-identify with our behaviors instead of recognizing that they are at some level external. We still have to take off the dirty garment and fix it, take it to the cleaners, but they are not who we really are.
One of the things I love about Teshuva is it isn't just acknowledging it. It is making it right. It is apologizing to someone. If we've offended a person, then we need to go make that right. If we have in some way done something that is against a commandment or that it is more universal or affects God, we need to make that right. And so we are not that mistake, and yet we are accountable for it and responsible to fix it. Right? Again,
yes.
More paradox. Both of those things are true.
Both of those things are true, and the fact that we are not our mistakes should inspire us to take responsibility. Just as if I don't say, "Well, I'm not taking my dress to the cleaners because it's just too embarrassing to go get it cleaned. What are they going to think of me?" It's like I take it to the cleaners. So this actually empowers me to take responsibility and to take care of it,
Mm-hmm.
because I have not over-identified with it. So in the book we talk about, comes from Lori Palatnik, a wonderful leader in the Jewish people, teacher, etc. She has an acronym. It's a little reverse of RSVP. It's SRVP.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the steps of Teshuva that you have to go through. So the S is stop. Stop doing what you're doing. You can't keep doing it and say you're also sorry. The R is to express regret, to have true regret. Mm-hmm. And the V is to verbalize. We need to say it. There's something happens when we acknowledge. Even in a court of law, sometimes the judge will have the accused, verbalize what they did. Mm-hmm. Say it, and don't say it like, "Well, accidents happen," instead of "I made a mistake." Right. The actual process of verbalizing is part of the process, and then the P is a plan. How do I plan not to have this happen again? What am I going to put in place that assures me that I will not make this mistake again? And this can be a mistake with me, myself, and I, just like a dieter. How am I going to not eat all the candy at the party? I'm not going to stand at the dessert table. I'm going to go stand near the celery. Mm-hmm. So there has to be a plan, otherwise we tend to slip right into what we did before. So SRVP, stop, regret, verbalize, and plan. And those are our steps for Teshuva. So it's very down to earth. It can't just be a thinking thing. Mm-hmm. It has to be an action thing.
So believe it or not, Ellyn, we have talked for almost an hour. I'm going to ask you something and see if you can just give me a short sentence. What keeps you inspired?
Life. The constant unfolding of my life, and knowing that I have a lot of tools to use to engage with my life, mm-hmm. and to help me through whatever the situation is, happy, sad, difficult, or exciting.
I love that, because I feel like that's what keeps me inspired too, is that every day there is still opportunity, and every day can be unique. So if you listened, thank you. If you just tuned in, you missed an amazing show. You're going to have to catch it on my website. This is the Dr. Elisa show on KUHS Denver, The Stream. Today, I want you to, as you know, I'm on every 2 weeks. Please come back in 2 weeks. I have Michal Ashman, the author of the book, What Would You Do If You Were Not Afraid? And the other thing I want you to do is go to Amazon and buy this book, right? Living in the Present Moment, A Divine Design by Ellyn Hutt. Ellyn, how can people find you if they would like to reach out?
You can find me most easily at my Gmail address, which is ellynahutt@gmail.com. And I'm checking my email all the time, happy to respond to you.
And if you can't find her there, then just post something in the Facebook site or get back in touch with me and I will connect you. And so, thank you for joining me today. And until we meet again, stay well, stay curious, stay present in your life, and most importantly, please, stay inspired.